The gunfire came again, closer now. 3 sharp cracks that cut through the storm like lightning, splitting the night. I moved to the window, brushing frost from the glass with the back of my glove. Through the swirling snow, faint orange glows bobbed up and down. Torches. My stomach dropped. There were men out there, pushing through the blizzard, and they weren't riding for shelter. They were hunting something or someone. I turned to Clara. Her face had gone pale again, eyes wide in the dim candlelight. "You know anyone out here who'd come looking for you?" I asked quietly. She shook her head, pulling the blanket tighter around her shoulders. "No, I don't know anyone west of St. Louis." That was enough for me. I grabbed the rifle, checked the chamber, and set a second pistol on the table beside her. "If they come through that door, you shoot. Don't think. Just aim and pull." Her hand trembled as she reached for it. I've never fired a gun before. Then tonight's as good a night as any to learn. The sound of hoofbeats grew louder. I could make out 3 riders now, dark shapes weaving through the snow, one carrying a torch high. The lead horseman dismounted and came forward, heavy boots crunching in the drifts. The knock that followed shook the cabin door. "Eli Thompson," a voice called, rough and unmistakable. "That you in there, boy?" My heart twisted. I knew that voice. "Calder," I whispered to myself. Clara looked at me, confused. "Who is he?" "Someone I used to ride with. Before I found my conscience." Another pounding knock. "Open up, Eli. Ain't no reason to hide from old friends." "Stay down," I told Clara. I moved to the door, but didn't open it. "What do you want, Calder?" A low laugh rolled through the wood. "Same thing every man wants out here. Food, fire, and a bit of comfort to pass the storm." "Try the next cabin," I said flatly. He laughed again, longer this time. "You always did like playing hero. Heard you left a ranch job near Rawlins. They said you were keeping to yourself these days. Guess I know why." His tone turned sharp. "We saw the wagon back there, Eli. Saw the tracks leading here. You pick yourself up a new lady traveler." Clara's hand flew to her mouth. I tightened my grip on the rifle. "You turn those horses around, Calder. You and your boys keep riding. This ain't your concern." "Everything west of the Mississippi's my concern," he said. Then came the sound of boots crunching closer. "We're coming in to warm our hands, whether you like it or not." The door shuddered as they hit it with their shoulders. Once, twice, the latch split. I raised the rifle and fired. The blast filled the cabin, smoke stinging my eyes. One of them screamed outside, falling into the snow. "Stay down," I yelled, throwing a glance at Clara. She was crouched behind the table, clutching the pistol like it was her only lifeline. The second rider burst through the doorway, firing wildly. Bullets tore through the wall, wood splintering above my head. I dropped low, rolled to the side, and squeezed off another shot. The man staggered backward, collapsing against the doorframe before falling into the snow. Then Calder was there, broad-shouldered, eyes wild, half his face wrapped in a scarf. He kicked the door open the rest of the way, holding a revolver in one hand and a grin on his scarred face. "Still shoot straight, Eli," he said, stepping over his dead man. "Didn't think you had it in you anymore." I leveled the rifle. "Don't test me." He tilted his head, torchlight dancing in his eyes. "You always were the moral one. Guess the war didn't burn that out of you like it did the rest of us." "Put down your gun, Calder. There's a woman here." His eyes flicked toward the corner where Clara hid. He chuckled darkly. "So I see. Pretty thing. Must get lonely out here, cowboy." Before he could take another step, I pulled the trigger. Click. Empty. My heart sank. I'd spent my last round. Calder grinned wider. "Looks like your luck's run out, friend." He fired. The bullet grazed my shoulder, spinning me back. I crashed into the table, sending the candle tumbling. The flame caught the edge of a curtain, and fire flared upward in an instant. Smoke filled the room. Clara screamed. Calder turned toward her, raising his revolver. That's when I heard another shot. Louder, closer. Clara stood trembling, both hands wrapped around the pistol I'd given her. The look on her face was half terror, half disbelief. Calder stared at her, eyes wide with surprise, then fell backward into the snow outside. The wind snuffed his torch as his body hit the ground. For a long second, there was nothing but the crackle of fire and the hiss of snow against burning wood. "Clara," I gasped, pressing a hand to my shoulder. Blood soaked through my coat, hot and sticky. She dropped the gun and ran to me. "You're bleeding." "I've had worse," I said, trying to laugh, but the room was filling with smoke fast. "We need to move." We dragged what supplies we could, blankets, the half-empty canteen, the rifle strap, and stumbled out into the storm. The cabin roared behind us, flames licking through the roof, sparks flying into the snow. We collapsed near the tree-line, both shaking, watching as the only shelter we had turned to cinders. Clara's hands were red from the heat and the cold. She looked at me with tears cutting down her sooty face. "I killed him," she whispered. I nodded slowly. "You saved us." The firelight from the burning cabin danced across the snow, painting the world in orange and gold. Behind us, the horizon was just beginning to lighten. The storm was breaking, the wind easing into tired sighs. But my shoulder burned, the wound deep. I could feel the strength bleeding out of me. Clara tore a strip of cloth from her skirt and pressed it against the wound, her hand steady now. "You hold on," she said fiercely. "Don't you die on me, Eli." I looked at her through the haze of smoke and snow. "You sound like someone who's decided to live again." She smiled faintly, tears shining in her eyes. "You gave me no choice." We sat there as dawn broke, the fire dying behind us, the world turning pale and quiet once more. The storm was over, but the night had left its mark on both of us. ChatGPT said, "The sun rose weak and thin, barely more than a pale disk behind the clouds." The storm had passed, but the cold still bit deep. I don't remember much of that morning, just the sting of snow on my face, the smell of smoke from the cabin ruins, and Clara's voice cutting through the haze, calling my name. When I opened my eyes again, I was inside what was left of the cabin. The walls were blackened and half collapsed, but somehow she'd cleared a space, patched the roof with tarp and blankets. The fire was going again, smaller this time, and the candle still burned beside me, that same one from the night before. I watched the flame tremble and thought how it looked like life itself, fragile, but stubborn enough to keep fighting. Clara sat beside me, tending the wound on my shoulder. Her hands were gentle but firm, wrapping cloth soaked with melted snow and whiskey. "You're lucky," she said softly. "Bullet went clean through." I winced. "Doesn't feel lucky." She gave me a small smile. "You're breathing, aren't you?" I tried to laugh, but it came out as a cough. Every breath burned. Still, there was something about the way she spoke, calm, certain, that made me believe I'd make it through. For the next few days, I drifted in and out of sleep. Fever dreams took me back to places I tried to forget. The battlefield, the screaming, the rain falling on bodies that didn't move. But every time I woke, I saw her there, sitting near the fire, candle glowing by her side. She'd whisper things I could barely hear, words that felt like prayers. One night, I came to with her hand in mine. Her face was lit by the candlelight, soft and tired but strong. "Don't stop," she whispered. "I need this." For a moment, I didn't understand. Then I realized she wasn't talking about me. Not really. She meant the warmth, the connection, the fight to stay alive. She'd lost everything, but she wasn't ready to lose this too. I squeezed her hand. "I'm not going anywhere," I said, though my voice was barely more than a breath. The next morning, I woke to find her outside, gathering wood. She looked smaller against the horizon, a lone figure in the white wilderness, but she moved with purpose. The kind of purpose that only comes when you've already faced the end and walked back from it. By the fourth day, I could stand again. The pain was there, sharp and constant, but my strength was returning. Clara helped me pack what supplies we had left, dried meat, coffee, and one canteen of water. The storm had cleared the road, and we could see the faint line of the trail heading east toward Fort Laramie. "You should come with me," I told her. "There's shelter there. Doctors. People." She smiled sadly, adjusting her shawl. "I can't. Oregon's still waiting for me. My husband's brother has a homestead there. It's where I was supposed to go." I didn't argue. Some things you can't change for people. You just have to let them walk their path. Before we left, she reached into her satchel and pulled out a small folded paper. "It's not much," she said, handing it to me, "but it's something I wrote when I thought I wouldn't make it. You keep it." I opened it. The handwriting was delicate, shaky from the cold, but the words were clear. To the man who found me when the world had forgotten I was still alive. You gave me back the will to keep walking. I folded it carefully and tucked it into my coat. We sat on my horse together. She adjusted the stirrup while I steadied myself. The sky had that clean, endless look it gets after a storm, too big for words. She climbed onto the wagon she'd salvaged from the drift, holding the reins tight. "Clara," I said quietly, "if you ever find what you're looking for out there, light a candle for me." She smiled, that same soft smile I'd seen when she first woke by the fire. "Only if you promise to do the same." I nodded. "Deal." She turned her wagon west and started down the frozen trail. I watched until she was just a blur against the horizon, swallowed by the white. The silence that followed felt heavier than the snow itself. I went back into the cabin, what was left of it, and stood by the table. The candle still burned there, flickering weakly but alive. I reached out and steadied it with my hand. That flame had seen everything: death, fear, mercy, and something close to love. It was the last witness to what we'd survived. I sat for a long time, listening to the wind. The world outside was quiet again, almost peaceful. I thought about all the men who'd died in storms like this. Men who'd fought nature, fought each other, fought themselves, and how somehow I was still here. When the candle finally burned low, I snuffed it out, packed my rifle, and stepped outside. The snow crunched under my boots. The sky was turning gold on the horizon. I climbed onto my horse, turned east, and whispered to no one in particular, "Guess it's time to keep that promise." As I rode away, the first light of morning spilled across the plains, touching the ashes of the cabin and the faint tracks of a wagon rolling west. Somewhere out there, Clara was chasing her new beginning. And for the first time in years, I wasn't running from my past. I was riding toward whatever waited next. Out here on the frontier, we don't always get the endings we want, but sometimes we get the ones we need. If this story touched your heart, give it a like, share it with someone who's weathered their own storm, and subscribe for more tale from the frontier. Until next time, ride safe, friends. The wind howled over the barren Texas plain, carrying with it the stinging taste of dust and old sorrow. The horizon stretched endlessly, a wasteland of dying grass and cracked earth beneath a copper sky. Every gust whispered of loss, of bones buried and promises forgotten. A lone rider cut through the desolation, his hat pulled low, his eyes narrowed against the grit. Eli Morgan had been riding since dawn, following no trail but the one the land carved in his memory. His only companion, a brindled cattle dog named Boone, trotted a few paces ahead, nose low to the ground, tail twitching with restless energy. Boone suddenly stopped, stiffened, and barked, sharp, frantic, almost desperate. Eli tugged the reins, scanning the plain. "What is it, boy?" he muttered. Boone didn't answer, just darted forward, barking again, then disappeared into the swirling haze. Eli's heartbeat quickened. Instinct told him to ride on, to keep heading west and not get tangled in someone else's misery. But something in Boone's tone wasn't just alert, it was pleading. Eli spurred his horse after him. The wind fought him every step, whipping the dust into his eyes. He slid off the saddle near a small hollow, where the earth had been gouged by the storm. Boone was there, pawing at something buried under a thin layer of sand. Eli dropped to his knees and brushed the dirt away and froze. It was a woman. Her skin was pale beneath the grime, lips cracked and bleeding. Her dress, once light blue, was torn nearly to ribbons. She was breathing, barely, shallow, uneven. Her fingers clutched something tightly against her chest. Eli leaned closer and pried her hand open. Inside, caked with dust and blood, was a small silver locket. He rubbed it clean with his thumb, and the world seemed to stop. Inside the locket was his own face, a small, faded photograph taken years ago before he'd gone off to fight in the war. The inscription beneath it read, "To my promised forever." Eli's throat went dry. His hat slipped from his hand. "Clara," he whispered, barely believing the sound of his own voice. The woman stirred, her eyelids fluttering open for a second. Her gaze, hazy, unfocused, Found him. A faint smile ghosted her lips. Eli, she breathed before falling back into unconsciousness. The name stabbed through him like a blade. Clara Wren, the woman he'd once sworn to marry. The woman he thought had died when her father's homestead was raided. Eli scooped her up in his arms, feeling the fragility of her frame. Boone whined softly, circling them. "It's her," Eli murmured, disbelief tangled with guilt. "It's really her." He carried her to his horse, lifted her gently, and turned toward the canyon ridge where his cabin sat hidden among the rocks. The ride back felt longer than any trail he'd ever taken. Every hoofbeat pounded a memory into his chest. Her laughter by the riverbank, the feel of her hand in his before he left for the war, the promise whispered under the oak tree, "I'll come back for you." But he never had. By the time he reached the cabin, the sun was sinking low, bleeding crimson light across the plains. He laid Clara on the cot, near the fire, and rushed to fetch water. Boone stood guard by the door, ears twitching at every sound. Eli soaked a rag and pressed it gently to her lips. Her skin was burning with fever. "Don't you leave me again," he muttered under his breath. "Not this time." He rummaged through his supplies. A few herbs, a half-empty bottle of whiskey, bandages still stiff with age. His hands shook as he cleaned her wounds, whispering to himself to keep steady. She murmured in her sleep, fragments of words that made his chest tighten. "The gold, they took the gold, and Cutter. He left me." The name chilled him. Cutter was a name from old war stories, a bandit who preyed on settlers and caravans along the Southern Trail. If he was near, Clara hadn't just stumbled into the dust. She'd been left there to die. Eli leaned back in his chair, the fire casting flickering shadows across the room. He stared at her, the woman who'd haunted his dreams and guilt alike. Every wrinkle of exhaustion, every bruise on her skin felt like his own failure. The sound of the wind outside became the echo of gunfire, screams, and the cries of the dying from years ago. He remembered the flames that consumed his home, the faces he couldn't save, the promise he broke. When the storm outside grew louder, Boone lifted his head, ears pricking. Eli followed his gaze to the window, just darkness and dust. "Easy, boy," he whispered. But Boone didn't relax. He growled low, his fur bristling. Eli stood, reaching for the rifle leaning by the door. He peered through the small crack in the wooden frame and froze. A faint glimmer in the distance. Movement. Someone out there, watching. He cocked the hammer slowly, every nerve in his body alive. The fire flickered, throwing long, uncertain shadows across Clara's still form. The wind howled louder, almost as if the land itself was holding its breath. Then came the unmistakable sound, a click, metallic and cold, somewhere beyond the walls. Boone's growl deepened. Eli's finger tightened on the trigger. The screen fades to black. The last thing heard is the faint echo of a rifle being cocked in the night. The dawn came quietly, as if the land itself feared to wake whatever evil lingered beyond the ridge. The storm had passed, leaving behind a thin veil of dust that turned the morning light into something pale and ghostly. Boone padded to the door, ears twitching, his nose lifting toward the open air. Eli poured water into a tin cup and checked on Clara. Her breathing was steadier now, though her skin still burned with fever. A sudden bark from Boone cut the silence. Eli stepped outside, squinting toward the canyon rim. 3 figures rode in the distance, small at first, then growing clearer against the light. Dust rose behind their horses like smoke. He saw the glint of rifles slung across their backs. Boone growled low, hackles rising. Eli's gut twisted. Bandits. He knew the type, the way they scouted first, rode slow to measure a man's worth before striking. He counted 3, maybe more behind. He turned to Boone. "Keep quiet, boy." Inside, Clara stirred. Her eyes fluttered open, searching until they found him. "Eli," she whispered, voice thin as paper. He knelt beside her. "Easy now. You're safe." But her expression shifted. Panic clouded her face. "They're coming. Cutter's men." Her hand trembled as she tried to sit up. "They took everything, the wagon, the gold. They left me for dead." Eli's heart sank. Cutter, he muttered. The name carried poison. He'd heard it before, an ex-soldier turned outlaw, known for leaving bodies in his wake. Clara's voice broke. He wanted the dowry, my father's gold. Said it'd buy him an empire. She coughed hard, the sound raw in the small cabin. I thought if I found you, we could start again. I thought. Eli stopped her gently, pressing a wet cloth to her lips. Don't talk. But she shook her head weakly. I never stopped believing you'd come back. That single sentence tore through him worse than any bullet. He turned away, ashamed of his silence. The fire popped in the hearth, and for a long while the only sound was the wind crawling through the cracks. By afternoon, the sky darkened again. A wall of dust began to gather far off, rising from the horizon like an advancing army. Eli's eyes narrowed. Storm's coming. He moved quickly, shuttered the windows, tied down the roof's loose boards, covered Clara with a wool blanket. The sound grew deafening, the cabin shaking under nature's fury. Boone pressed close to Clara's cot, refusing to leave her side. The world turned to chaos outside, sand scraping the walls, wind screaming through the canyon like the cries of the damned. Eli knelt beside her, holding her hand as if his grip alone could keep her from vanishing again. When the storm finally passed, silence fell heavy. He stepped out to survey the land, the horizon wiped clean by dust. Tracks had been erased, except for one faint set of footprints that hadn't been there before. Barefoot, light, deliberate. Not from any of Cutter's men. Eli followed them to a rocky ridge half a mile out. Boone trotted beside him, nose to the ground. A flicker of movement caught his eye, a man standing still as a stone, watching from above. His hair was long, braided with feathers, his chest bare under a tattered poncho. He carried a bow, though his expression held no threat. Don't move, Eli called, hand hovering near his revolver. The stranger didn't flinch. If I wanted you dead, you would be, he said in calm, accented English. The woman in your cabin, she draws wolves. Eli frowned. You been watching us? I follow the men who hunt her. Cutter's dogs. Eli studied him carefully. The man's gaze was sharp, but not cruel. Name's Eli Morgan. Taza, the man said simply. Apache blood, once of the band that rode with Cutter. I left when I saw what he truly was. Eli hesitated, lowering his weapon a little. Then you know where he's headed. Taza nodded toward the south. The canyon. He'll come for her, for what she carries. When Eli returned to the cabin, he found Boone scratching at the door, whining. The cot was empty. Clara was gone. For a moment, the world stopped turning. Her footprints, small, bare, led out toward the riverbed. Then came another set, heavy, boot-pressed. Gunfire cracked across the valley. Eli's heart leapt into his throat. He grabbed his rifle, mounted his horse, and kicked hard. Boone tore ahead through the dust, barking, leading the way. The storm might have passed, but the real fight had only just begun.